Welcome, everybody, to the lucky number 13 Forged podcast. I am Danielle Rima, and I'm part of the Forged podcast team. And Matt, who has hosted the previous dozen, asked me to host tonight's because we are joined by two mothers. And I am very, very excited to have them on the show. And tonight we are going to talk about motherhood and race. And as a Forge team, we got together to toss around ideas about what our next podcast would be. And tonight's podcast and last week's podcast with Cameron were not what we originally had scheduled. But with how everything is going in our world right now and in the nation, we thought it was important. And I brought up the idea of having mothers on the show kind of after I read the transcript of George Floyd in just the 9 minutes, almost 9 minutes that were videotaped of just that whole situation. And at one point, he cried out for his mom. And I saw it put best when this woman who was at one of the rallies, and she said, when he cried out for his mom, he summoned all mothers. And I thought, how important is that for all moms to hear and to see that, because nobody has the right to take the life of a mother's child. And so to be able to hear from these mothers is so important. So I'm going to introduce you guys to them. We have my dear friend Heather Lowry on here. Heather and I go to church together. I'm going to let her introduce herself here in just a minute. And then we have Melisha, or Lisa, as I grew up with her, Yancey. And so she's joining us from Tennessee. So welcome, ladies. Thank you for coming on our show.
Thank you for inviting us.
So I am going to kind of give you guys each a little bit of time to introduce yourselves. We'll start with, we're going to go, I guess, left to right based on my screen. So we'll start with Melisha. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you're doing, your job, just kind of let us get to know you a little bit.
Yeah, so my name is Melisha Yancey. I go by Lisa for most of my close friends and family. Like as Danielle was saying, she grew up with me in school. And so I go by Lisa. I am originally from Hot Springs, born and raised. And I have been blessed with a gorgeous baby boy. He is 8 now, but his name is Elijah. I'm a single mom to him. I'm in insurance. I work with a really good company. They're actually in Arkansas, it's based out of. It's USA Life, and it is a really great company. We do a lot with Blue Cross partners and things like that. So we're spread out, across the United States. That's what moved me from Hot Springs up here to Tennessee.
Well, thank you. I have family in Tennessee, and I have been to the Chattanooga Aquarium.
Oh, it's beautiful here. I love it.
Yeah. Okay, Heather, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so my name is Heather Lowry. I am in Hot Springs, Arkansas right now. My husband and I are originally from Little Rock. We've been married for almost 20 years, and he is a police officer. We are also foster parents. We've been fostering since 2017. And in 2018, we adopted a little girl named Harper. Well, she's named Harper now, and she will be 4 in a couple months. I work at a physician's office, a locally owned physician's office. I've been there for 17 years. And right now I just do like accounts payable stuff. But really, that's my life.
Well, awesome. So I was super blessed to get to kind of walk the entire adoption process with Heather and her husband. And I'm sure if you listen to the video from the adoption, I'm the one crying in the background because, it's just one of those things. And I have her daughter and then one of her foster sons in my ministry at church. So I get to see them all the time and just super, super precious kids. So that's just been a blessing. And so kind of to start with that, Heather, I'm just going to ask you a question. So when you and Sean were started to foster, and I had known nothing about the foster process. So, did you guys have any hesitations on adopting or fostering a child of a different race? Was that like, and maybe not even hesitation is a word, but like, did you guys talk about that? Was that something that, was a conversation you all had?
Yes. So when I was a teenager, God put it on my heart about adoption. And so I knew I wanted to adopt a child at some point in life. And I wanted to do a different, it was on my heart to do a different race. Okay. And so, Sean and I talked about that years ago, and he was okay with that. In the adoption process, or even in the foster process, you have an entire list of attributes, things you're not comfortable with, things that you would consider or you're okay with. But they also have like a social worker, psychiatrist come to your home, and they will to do like your home study to make sure like what you've put on paper is true. And they also question you about your family. Like if you do adopt or foster a kid from a different race, how is your family going to react? And so they really do some investigation work to try to make sure that if they place a child with you, that they're going to be cared for like they should be, and that you can provide for them.
So were there any, so when you guys, because you guys fostered Harper for how long? Sorry.
I'm sorry, right? We got matched with her for adoption. It started in October of 2017, but they didn't call us again until March or April, I think. And she got placed in our home in May of 17, and then our adoption day was in November.
Okay.
May of 17. I think I meant 18. I'm a year behind. I'm sorry.
Nobody knows what year it is.
I know, right? No, we're forgetting this year, right?
Yes, we will.
But no, so we were matched through the state, and so we had to technically foster her for 6 months to make sure it was a good fit all the way around for her, because their focus is finding a home for the child, not finding a child for us.
Right.
So that's why November was the adoption date.
Now, were there any, I guess, kind of leading up to this point, because y'all have had, she's been yours forever, basically. Have you faced any obstacles having like and I want to get into this later because your husband is a cop and your child is biracial. And those are kind of two, right now in this country, two completely opposite sides of the spectrum.
Right.
So have you faced any obstacles with that?
So, and with her age right now, we really have not, with as young as she is. I'm not naive. I can, you kind of expect that it's going to happen. You just don't know when. But honestly, I have not yet, but I have seen like racism as far as like us going into a restaurant and waiting on a table, and people like looking at Harper and then looking at us, and you can just like tell in their face the hate, and it is so sad to me.
Especially because one, like, Harper's the most beautiful, like,
right.
And she's a diva just like her dad.
Yes,
she is just,
absolutely.
So to kind of add on to that, so Melisha, so you grew up, pretty much in a predominantly white school. So kind of tell us a little bit about, you growing up in that, because like I had told Matt when we were talking about this, I don't know much about how other people are brought up because, I'm just a white Arkansas girl. And so, and I don't mean that to sound bad. So that's why I'm super excited to hear from you, because I think that when people kind of start to understand and can see what it's like to grow up, just differently from them, they'll have a little bit more understanding and maybe a little bit more compassion and stuff. So tell us a little bit about you kind of growing up here in Hot Springs.
Yeah. Hot Springs, well, I'll say there's 3 different sides to Hot Springs. There is the really countryside.
Yes.
There is the inner city side, and then there is the very sedity, uppity side.
Yes.
And that's the side I actually grew up in, because predominantly white. And I grew up in a white neighborhood. It was a lot different, I'll say, I guess, for as far as my journey was, just because people expected different things from you. They looked at you differently. They expected you to have certain things to say about yourself. I got asked questions about my hair, my skin, and I had to really kind of go back to different kids, like when I was growing up, things that they would say to me, like just playing like normal things, like when girls would play, like we're all going to be sisters together, and then one of them, I remember one of them saying, what about Lisa? Like, well, we'll say that she was bad and she painted herself brown. And I remember that, and I was like, okay. Then I remember that, I was like, wait a minute, how come the brown girl got to be bad? How come y'all didn't paint yourselves white?
Right.
So I think about that now because this is what they said. They were like, this only way that she could fit in was because I was painting myself brown. I couldn't, they didn't see families like that. And, I also grew up in an interracial home. My stepfather is white. And we would have a lot of stares at us. A lot of times, like if he would go into a place first and finally we were coming up behind him, people would start talking to him differently. They would start reacting differently to us. They would treat him differently when they found out that he was married to a Black woman who I may be biased, but she's gorgeous because she's my mom. But they would look at us a little bit differently. They would treat us bad, and like with my brother being on the football team, and I'm not going to name schools, but there was other school that didn't have Black people at their school, and they would come and they would trash our house. They would say things. They would put things in our yard. They would spray things on cars, and it's like, oh well, we can't prove it. We don't know who it is. We don't no, we can't prove it. But my gosh, why is this happening? Like, why is it that this is? But what made it most important for me is that I needed to form my circle. I needed to form my friends that became my family. And it was like, hey, I don't like what they're saying about this. We had some teachers that would say bad things or would say disrespectful things, and we had to know how to speak up. Like, we had made a lot of change during my time at Lakeside because we had to, change the school. We had to say, hey, you know what? We need to make sure that we have Black people represented on this homecoming court. Yep. We need to make sure that we have Martin Luther King Day off. We had to fight to have that day off. And at first, they weren't willing to make it a school holiday, but they said that, okay, if you're going to be participating in a Martin Luther King Day activity, you could have a note sent in from your parent. We will excuse you that day. And
I remember that.
That went on for a couple of years. And finally, by the time I was in ninth grade, they were like, okay, yeah, we'll give you that day off. And wow. Well, geez, thanks for catching up with the rest of the world. Because it wasn't something they could relate to. It wasn't anything that they were ready to recognize, because it was a school that was ran by privileged people that did, that had no idea how much of an importance that day meant to us.
Yeah. And I think that's one thing too, anytime my youngest is in kindergarten, and they did presentations on Martin Luther King, and like the teachers that we have had, my boys, they've been very intentional on making sure that we don't just learn about George Washington and Christopher Columbus, like that there's color into their lives. And that's so important, because that wasn't something that was instilled in us and in school. And I think that's caused problems.
That is true. We were not taught our history. I learned about Black history through church, through different other outreach programs that we were involved in, because the schools were not teaching it. Some schools still don't teach it. I'm sad to say that my son this year also goes to a predominantly white school, and he was not taught Black history for Black History Month. And I ordered shirts that talked all about, my Black is great. My ancestors are going to be awesome. I was like, you're going to wear it, and you're going to read about Tuskegee Airmen. Because of it, what schools understand is that Black history is more than just slavery and Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks. We had great contributions, and I think it's great that everybody learns about it.
The one thing I remember, growing up, you remember the most random things, is I remember that George Washington Carver was a Black man, and he invented peanut butter. Don't ask me like why. To this day, I'm like, this man invented, like, to me, that was just one of those things that I was like, thank you.
We all want peanut butter. I'm telling you.
So now, Heather, Harper is really young, but has she said anything, or have you noticed kind of where she may see where she's different from her parents, different from her foster siblings? Like, have you noticed any of that just at her young age?
So she has not yet, but one of the foster boys we have just completed kindergarten this year. And he started to ask questions about why her skin is darker, why she doesn't look like us. And to which, I replied that God didn't make everybody the same. He made everybody different colors. That her skin is beautiful and that, she is an image of God. And I know we talked the other day about it, and Lisa, she just said way more beautiful words than I did about it. Her illustration, right? Exactly. But you're just trying to plant the seeds within the boys and all the kids that we have, that we don't have to match. We're a family. You don't have to look like somebody to love them. Like we have shirts that say families don't have to match, because you don't. And I fully believe that God had her for our home. And I'm hoping that, we can just plant those seeds for these kids that hopefully they'll remember later on, it's okay if somebody's skin doesn't look like mine. They are made from God too. Right. And we are all equal,
Well, and we talked about that. So prior to this podcast, I kind of had conversation with the ladies because I didn't want them to be blindsided by questions, but then I also had questions. So one question I asked was, what Melisha, what do you prefer? Is it woman of color? Is it black? And so we had this conversation, and she said something that I literally was like, oh yeah. And it was something that your son had said. So tell us about that. I want you to kind of tell about that conversation that we had.
Yeah. So we was picking him up from school one day, and we were just kind of do our normal routine after school, heading home. And he asked me a question, and you know how kids are. They just come up with a random off the wall question. You've got to be on point with these kids. And he just says, Mom, why are we called African Americans? And so I had to go ahead and educate him. I was like, well, that's what the term that Jesse Jackson came up with to keep us from being called Negroes. And, so I don't want to lie to him. I want to make sure that he is well educated, because education is going to be the key to him overcoming any obstacle that's coming his way. And he was like, so are we supposed to call white people white Americans? And I was like, son, no, for some reason we don't. And then I looked at it more, and it's just like, no, we're not going to call them white Americans. We're not going to do that. I was like, we're all Americans. This is their way to classify us as another opportunity to say that we're different, basically, is what society is making it. And I was like, you're black. Your black is beautiful. Your black is great. Your black is strong, is powerful. But don't go calling folks white American. We're not going to do that.
But I loved how, even at 8 years old or however old he was he was like he caught on to that, even at such an early age. So is there anything that he has come home and just was like, Mom, I can't believe this happened to me? He's only 8, but kids kind of pick up on stuff, but has he dealt with any situations at school or just being out in public where he has felt basically discriminated against because of the color of his skin?
Yeah, well, I'll give a couple of different examples. Yeah. One is a little bit funny, and then one is had me kind of really questioning, what were they going at? I'll start off with the funny one first. And he comes, he's like, they think I'm so cool at school. We had to come over to a new school, and it was middle of the year, and he was like, they think I'm cool. I think that I'm going to play basketball really good and do all this. I know all these dances. And let me just say, my son's probably going to have an academic scholarship. Maybe he's going to have an athletic scholarship. And he was like, I'm the cool kid because they think I can do this. And I'm like, oh, they think that, huh? But I'm knowing why they think that, because they think that all people have rhythm. And, he doesn't have rhythm, and he probably got that from me because I don't have that much rhythm either. But he doesn't play basketball that well. He gets excited. He tries his hardest, but he's not the best player on the team. But he didn't understand why they were saying those things. Another incident that happened about a year ago, a kid threatened him. It was a police person's child, and had threatened him and was, I'm not going to go too many details. It basically was saying, I can get a gun, I can come to school, blah, blah. And when I come to get him from school, I'm not notified about this. I don't get a phone call. I pull up to the school and the teacher is waiting outside to the aftercare program to talk to me. I'm like, hello, how are you? And she's like, oh, I need to talk to you about Elijah and what happened and things and that. And it was a child that was 3 grades older than he was. And I was like, and she kept saying, and I said, well, what was this kid is he gonna be, in trouble? He's threatened my son. He said he's gonna be bringing a gun to school. What's going on? And she goes, oh, no, he's a good kid. I said, well, so is mine. Why are you out here talking to me?
Mm-hmm.
And, and so I had to kind of go home and, I didn't want my Isha to come out because she will. And so I had to grab my son. I went home and I got his full side of the story. And after I got that side, I was like, wait a minute. It's not adding up right. I need to, I contacted his teacher and she was like, oh no, it was happening after care. It's not my issue. I'm like, nobody is concerned about this good child say they're going to be bringing a gun to school. And so I had to go there that next morning. I was like, no, son, you're not going to go in there. I'm going to go in there and I'm going to make something known and let her know. I said, I don't think that you care about the safety of my child. I said, you have let me know that a child that wanted to threaten my son's life is a good child, but you want me to have a talk with mine. I said, at no point should a 5th grader be with a 2nd grader on the playground unsupervised at all.
Right.
And again, if another child and other children were saying, another person saying they can bring a gun to the school, you better pull out all the stops to make sure that not just my child, but every child is corrected and taken care of and protected. And she just wanted to make sure that I spoke to my child about it. I said, and then she wanted to come back and ask me, was everything okay in the home? And I said, until you pay bills in mine, don't worry about my home. And he did not go back to that program for quite some time. But after that, I'll just say that communication really picked up and improved there.
Good.
So.
Well, and
that is terrible.
And that's what I've never understood how, like, oh, he's a good kid. Good kids, why? Why is he considered a good kid and your child not? Like, that makes me so mad because, but I'm the type of parent too, like, if the teacher calls and she's like, okay, there was a situation, I'm like, what did my kid do? Like, I'm already like, okay, I know it was my kid. In a situation, like, and stuff like, but so I like how, like, you were vocal. Like, some parents would just be like, okay, but you were like, no, because even when in school, you were outspoken because conversations like this have to happen and it's not okay at all, So this is kind of a question for both of you guys. So what do you guys think the biggest obstacle in raising your children, the biggest obstacle is? And I asked this question because my husband and I watched a TV show recently and it was based on like a Black community. And I remember the dad saying, now, if you get pulled over by a cop, make sure you keep your hands on the steering wheel and make sure you say yes sir, no sir. And I thought, when I left the house, my parents said, okay, be careful, and so that's just kind of something that it's been in the back of my mind. Like, it just breaks my heart for one. But I just want to know because we're all moms, like, kind of what you see as like the biggest obstacle, the biggest challenge that you're going to have just as your kids get older. And Heather, you can start if you.
Okay. Yeah. Well, honestly, I've been thinking about that. And the main thing is just the fallen world that we live in. Yeah. With everything that's happened this year, I'm like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen next? Right. Just things we couldn't even imagine. And things that shouldn't be happening are still happening. But I just, I know at some point racism, it's going to be an issue. Gosh, it's just hard for me with her just being so young. Yeah. It's hard for me and plus she's a girl. But I know, like, and I've heard people say, like Black friends, like they can't carry big purses, and I carry big purses, and I just felt, like, oh my gosh, they're exactly right. And I don't know if it's just because I'm a police wife and have been for so long. This is just weird, but anytime I have a big purse, I always feel like somebody in the store is watching me, Yeah. And I think it's just from what my husband's profession is, but just how sad is it that some people can't even carry that purse,
Right.
just because of prejudice and racism and I just.
Yeah. Now, what about you? Because Malaysia, I almost said you grew up Black, obviously.
I did. You're exactly right, Danielle. I'm glad you noticed that.
And here's the I never I always try my best not to be like, oh, my Black friend, because I don't like that. You know what
I know.
So okay, so let's just erase what I just said. So how what do you think obstacles are, based on, because you're growing up and now raising a son, what do you feel are going to be your biggest obstacles as your son becomes a teenager?
My goodness, and it's having that thick skin, and Heather, like you were right, we can't go in with big purses and leave it wide open. And I've been followed in a store before by somebody.
Mm-hmm.
I walk into a really nice upscale store. The first thing they asked me was, "What's my budget?" And I said, "What's your style?" And
Right.
you didn't ask me about what their budget was. And
Right.
My biggest obstacles and fears basically is knowing that my son will not always have me around
Yeah.
to protect him. Most people know that my son has a crazy mama and knows to not play, and I don't mess around like that. And I don't let him go around the corner to play with the other friends that are, playing around the street. I don't do that. I make sure that he stays close to home. You're where I can see you. When he's with friends who are white and they're staying over their house, I have the conversations with their parents. It's like, hey, treat him like he's your own. I have to trust you with him. And if I don't feel trusted, or somebody gives me a bad feeling, I have to say, no, son, you're not. I don't know them well enough. I don't know how they will protect you, because it may not just be them. It may be other people they may come in contact with.
Yeah.
We see it all the time. We grew up going to sleepovers and let's all go to the movies. I'll go out into the mall and hang out with our friends. Well, that's when stuff may happen. And are those friends equipped? I have to make sure that he knows and said, hey, you need to stand up for yourself. Make sure that your friends know how to stand up for you. Make sure that everyone knows that you are all each other's responsibility, because we have to take care of each other. The moment that we don't, that's when the enemy can come in and can destroy us and that can take us down. And that's not what we're here for. Not at all. And it scares me. Sometimes I have those moments. I know we all have those mother intuition moments where we'll be in the middle of our work day and doing something, and all of a sudden our kids just come on our heart. We'll start thinking about them, and I just start saying, Lord, please protect my son. I don't know what's going on, but just if you could just have my voice pop in his head and let him know that I'm with him. I'm here for him. And I feel like when we talked about George Floyd, when he called out for his mom, I cried. I sat in this very room in that chair behind me, and I cried. And then the next morning I woke up and I saw that his mother had actually passed away. The first thing that came to my mind was, did he see her?
Yeah.
Did he hear her? Because I figured that that's something that would have happened. I would come from my child. And I feel like if my child was needing me, I'm going to feel that somewhere. I'm going to have that mother intuition, and it bothers me and it worries me, the fact that somebody out there could be plotting against my son. Somebody could see my son as a threat and feel like he doesn't deserve to have another moment in this world that God placed him in. And it's saddening. It's very saddening. And unfortunately, with these times, I don't know, it's difficult because people are just so blatant with their words, and they're not understanding how hurtful that what they're saying. And, like you were saying, like you have Black friends, and people say, oh, I have Black friends, or I have a Black child, or I have my niece is Black. And I'm like, that's great, but you may like that person. Are you willing to stand up for all the people that look like them?
Right.
And you may like the character of that person, but how do you feel about Black people? And that's the bigger question here is, we're not talking about your Black friend. We're talking about a Black person that's down the street that's hurting right now because of somebody hurting them.
Yeah. One, we're all human. Like, I think that's what people don't realize. Like, it's not black and white. It's human and human. Like,
Right.
we all have the same feelings, the same hurts. You know, like there was a movie and it's like we all bleed the same color. You know, like it shouldn't matter. And so, Heather, talking about George Floyd, because you kind of have like kind of both perspectives, I guess. So how did you react? What kind of came to your mind when you heard about that and saw the videos? And let me just say this with Heather's husband is literally the example of what a cop should be. I think I always joke because he's always the one in the front of the parade escorting the celebrities. And so I'm always like, Sean, like, are you really a cop? But he is an example. And our church is full of great police officers and SWAT team. And so I don't know of anyone close to me that I would be like, okay, I could see them doing that. Like all the police officers that I know in our town are good. So kind of how did that hit you as a mom and as the wife of a cop when you heard about that?
So, I mean, just like everybody else, I was just, like sickened and appalled and mad. And I'm thinking like, how did this guy even get on the force? And that he was somebody's son. That's a life that mattered, all lives. I'm sorry, I didn't even want to, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But, I couldn't even imagine, that this is still going on and it's still happening. And it makes me fear for my child too. But like you said, I'm torn. I'm on both sides. Yeah. And the thing that I hate too, is that it's like all cops are getting smeared and not all cops are bad. And the good definitely outweigh the bad. It's terrible. It shouldn't have happened. And we need justice and we need change. Yeah. There's, obviously there's something is missing, something is wrong. But I'm on the flip side too. It's totally wrong. We need justice, absolutely. But all cops are not bad. Yeah. All cops didn't do this. It just some terrible people that obviously should not be on the force. I feel like I have mom brain. Do you ever feel that way? Like I just got so much, and you just,
Heather,
like,
and I'll say this too, Heather. It's like, we always hear that question about what about the good cops, and it's like this. And my thing is, they should all be good cops.
That's right.
Yes. That
Absolutely.
should be the standard. That should be the 100% minimum requirements you need to have. You are a good person. You have a good heart. You have a good mindset.
Absolutely.
The issues that you're seeing as far as the discussions regarding the police officers, it's not against the profession of a cop. It is against the systemic racisms and the policies that are in place that are protecting the people who are wearing that as a shield to cover up the wrongdoing that they are doing out in the streets. And that's what we are trying to fight. When I tell Elijah when things happen, so he can stay up to date and knowing what's going on. And, he saw me crying. I said, yes, this man was killed by a police officer rather than broad daylight. These people, nobody helped him. And, and I told him on that Friday, I was like, oh my God, I started screaming. I was like, yes, we can't believe it. He goes, I was like, they arrested that guy. They arrested the guy that killed George Floyd. And his first response was, they found him?
Well, no, they knew exactly who he was.
I said, they found him. He goes, well, yeah, if you kill somebody, you go to jail. I said, no, baby, they were protecting him. Yeah. To keep, so he could have no time to get his life and everything else in order before they were going to arrest him. And so people need to understand is that the same way if a cop gets hurt, something like that, how those cops rally together to try to help protect that family. Our family died on that street.
Right.
Our family was murdered in broad daylight. Our family is Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Philando Castile, George Floyd. That's our family. So we all rallied together. We are outraged. And it's not about the cops as the profession. It's about the policies that are in place that are protecting the ones that are doing the wrong.
Right.
We know that not all cops are bad cops. Not all Black people are thugs or do wrongdoing. Not all Black people are racist. That's not, we're trying to talk about how are we going to be unified as one, as a human race, is what God intended us to be. And how are we going to help stand up to protect? This is not a race war. This is a love. This is a love versus hate.
Yeah.
We need to drive out
Absolutely.
hatred. And that's the only way we can overcome it, is by teaching love and light within our families.
So then what do you guys think about, I know like up in Seattle, and I want to say Minneapolis, they're talking about disbanding the police. And that's kind of big.
Disbanding or defunding the police?
I think in Seattle, didn't they took over a 6-block area and they were like, I mean, but, and
yeah,
they, you know, like and then defunding too. Yes.
right.
But I know,
both.
Yes. And just,
there's been talk of both.
Yeah. So what do you guys, I mean, is this a good, I mean, what are kind of y'all's thoughts on that? I mean, Heather, I know you're like, listen, I got bills to pay, so we can't.
No. And, you know, and I'll say this, like for here in Chattanooga, we have talked about defunding the police, and, you know, this is not a very large town, you know, they don't need millions and millions of dollars for a budget when we have other areas within our city that are needing support from the city. And you know, and it's like, oh, well, how can we help them? It's like, well, why do you need to have a $10 million budget for a police force? Why don't we go ahead and why don't we redistribute some of those funds? And it's not defunding the police. It's like, let's start investing in what we say is causing the problems. Let's put investments back into the education system. Let's help, you know, get teachers in. Let's help pay teachers correctly, the right amount of money, so that they can help teach our children properly. Let's help make sure that we have funding available for these after-school outreach programs for the inner city students that need to have positive influences.
Right.
It's not about totally disregarding police all the time. Like I just said, it's not about the profession of the police officers. It's like, are we really going to be continue to pay them millions and millions of dollars for this department to not care about our voices, but want to complain about our actions? Yeah. And it's like, you've got to help provide and support everyone in your community. Why is only a part of your community thriving and thriving and doing great things when you still have an area that's hurting? And that's where you see crime. That's where you're seeing the poverty is increasing. It's okay. Let's look into those areas. What can we do? Well, let's refigure these funds. Let's have a reorg of our city to make sure that we are applying money correctly so that everyone can have a chance.
Yes. Melisha for president. That was great.
Yeah.
I don't want that job.
It is so true though, because you see so much money wasted. I'm not saying just in the police department. I'm not saying it's wasted, but you see all this money and you're like, but there's no, like our boys club was closed down for a little bit and just reopened. You know, and that was a place that, I mean, I grew up going to the boys club, and that was a place where you just went and, you know, I met my husband at the boys club when I was 10. Okay. So, you know, but it's like, and you read about in bigger cities where they take and they, you know, they'll open up community centers, or they'll do like big brother, big sister. And sometimes all it takes is one person to pour into the life of the kid to completely turn it around. And with my husband working in juvenile court, you know, for over 10 years, he saw a lot of that. You know, he worked in the jail prior, and he said so many of the kids that he had on probation in juvenile court, their dads or their moms were in jail. And he said, and that's what is so sad, is it's this cycle. And I read this article today, and it talked about how prison is supposed to be a rehabilitation, not an institution. I think we forget about that too.
Right.
And it's like, so often kids are just put to the back burner because, you know, their parents in jail. Okay, well, that's the kid you need to be pouring into, because that kid has nothing else, has nobody else to pour into them, because they're one without a parent, you know? And so I think it's so important, you know, for, you know, like Melisha said, for money to go to where it needs to be used, you know, to where it can be useful. And I mean, I don't know how much people spend on, or, you know, cities spend on police departments with that, but I do know that there is a lot of money, like I said, that could be redistributed to make a difference.
Because I'll say this, and Heather, I know you can nod without saying your husband's salaries, because it's not going to the police officers themselves. They don't have a
Right.
healthy, nice salary. They're not out there
Exactly.
driving Mercedes Benzes and things like that.
Right.
So the police force, I mean, even if you want to keep money within the police force, let's start with saying, okay, you need to meet a certain number of requirements. You need to go to these type of social diversity classes,
Yeah.
things like that. That way you show us these certification levels, and great, we have the funds to be able to pay you more. But you're going to go also to these lessons to be able to know how to handle people that don't look like you, how to not feel threatened by someone with a darker skin that comes up against you. And just because we're walking down the street, it's not always suspicious activity. We're just walking down the street.
Right.
You know, and I think that when you set that bar higher for police officers, you get a better quality of people that are going to meet those standards. And then you're able to pay them more appropriately. And then that way, everything is reflected better, because the millions of dollars that are being funded into the police force is not going to the officers that are working on the streets.
Yeah.
Right. She had some very good and valid points. And I think that just, there needs to be like open communication about where the funding is going, you know, and with, you know, the Black community needs to come in. They need to talk to like the upper echelon, whoever makes the decisions, to say, hey, you know, where's this money going? Why, you know, why is this much allocated there? She had some very good points. I just think that, like, I don't even understand all the workings of the police department, and like their budget. I don't even know what their budget is or anything. So I think that would be a good communication, you know, a good open line of communication for the people in our city and, you know, cities around the world, as a good step, you know, a good stepping stone. But like she said, it's definitely not going to the officers. Definitely not.
So, Heather, just, you know, because Sean's been a cop forever, do they have anything in place like that? Like a training? Like, do they do, like when the situation with George Floyd happened, the murder of George Floyd, was there anything given to our police officers here in Hot Springs? Did they have any conversations, any conferences or anything about, you know, about that?
Honestly, I do not know. Okay. So I don't want to chime in on that and give, you know, wrong information. If Sean was here, I would ask him, but he's not. But I know that they do have training that they have to complete at least annually, you know, all different kinds of trainings. You know, it could be for taser, you know, sexual harassment, discrimination, you know, they have to complete at least annually at his department. But I can't say for sure whether they had additional training.
I just wonder what all happens in the police force when something like this happens, and then you kind of see a shift in, you know, because I was always taught, you know, when you need help, you go to the police officers. But then you see cops like this, and you're like,
right.
So there's this cop, and there's cops standing all around him, and nobody is stepping in to help a man who was handcuffed behind his back, and you know, so.
I know, but you know, just remember, they are the minority, definitely.
Right. Oh no,
those bad officers, you know, and that they are there, you know, to help. They should be there to help you for sure.
And like you said, Heather, and I completely agree. There are more good cops in this world,
right?
You know. Yeah. So, anyways, just to get off the rabbit hole that we were on.
Well, I did have a joke. Not a joke, but when and if you know, and I feel like I've known you for a long time, and I haven't, but when, you know, like some people were saying, put more. No, I'm just not even. We'll just skip that. Okay. Never mind. Never mind.
I was waiting. I was like, I got my pen. Like, what's you about to say?
I'm sorry.
We'll talk offline after this, Heather.
Yes.
So, so the whole situation was just awful, and it's something that is, sadly, something that we see too often, you know. But I just want, you know, there are good cops and there are good people. And it's sad that it had to take this to get to this conversation.
Right.
But, so as moms and as, human beings with heart and compassion, I just want to kind of ask you ladies both this. If you guys could speak just one word that would kind of sum up just how you feel about all of this, like for me, something I'm always I guess it's more than one word, but I always say grace and truth, like trying to find the grace in the situation, but the truth in the situation, so what is that one or two words that you guys would say just kind of about this situation? I know it's kind of a tough question, but
I know. So, but I have a word, but I have an explanation.
Okay.
So my word is Jesus, that we
Right.
as a world need Jesus. We need to hate what he hates, and he hates racism.
Mm-hmm.
And that he's the only way we're going to get through this, and that, he is peace. And that's what we need.
Yeah.
That's good. That is correct. And I guess for me, I would just say is listen with the intent of hearing.
Yep.
Um,
That's good.
So many times, we'll have our kids talk in the background. We hear that we're like, okay, we hear you, but we really don't.
Right.
I have been in several roundtable discussions over the past several weeks to speak on my experiences, things I have endured, things how I feel, and most have been pleasant. I had one instance where it was not. The devil just came right on in and just used him up, and he basically just said that racism didn't exist like we're saying. We're exaggerating it.
Mm-hmm.
He basically just said that now I made him feel guilty for being white. And I just looked at him with thoughts, and I didn't even want to speak to that anymore because I knew that wasn't him.
Right.
We have to not just have Jesus, but we have to also know to recognize when hatred is trying to come in.
Mm-hmm.
We have to be willing to stand up for what we know is right. Jesus is right.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus is never wrong. He created us all equal. Society is what has divided us, and we have to be back unified. I always tell my son when he does things wrong or his actions, I say, you better behave like Jesus is sitting right next to you.
Yep.
And so I said, everybody, like, how would you feel if Jesus was sitting right next to you? How would your actions be? And I've lost several quote unquote friends, church members, and things like that over the past few weeks because I questioned myself. I said, there's no way we both serve the same God.
Yeah.
Not with words like this.
Yeah.
Not with what you're saying. So when you are having these conversations and when you're speaking to people of color, is you have to make sure that you are listening with the actual intent of hearing.
Yeah. And I think sometimes people just, like you said, your kids in the background and you're just like, yeah, it's great. Like, did you hear what I said? No clue you were even still talking,
Mm-hmm.
So at Forge Podcast, our big thing is generational wisdom. It's wanting to document things. That's why we do the podcast, with different events that are going on in the world. So if you guys could say anything, let's say to your great grandchildren about maybe like a hope you have for them, or a hope you have for the world, or just kind of something you'd like to pass down to them about anything from the color of your skin, racism, just kind of anything that we've talked about tonight. What would you want them to know from you and from your heart at this moment? Let y'all think for a second, and then we'll.
Right.
Because I know for me, my hope is that when my grandchildren or great grandchildren are walking this earth, that situations like this are far, few and far between, but also that they appreciate the difference in the color of people's skins or their ethnicities, and that they're willing to to learn about that. Because I'm always, as a former hairdresser, I recently retired, I was always obsessed with the Black girls at school doing hair. Like, I'd be like, girl, one day I was like, I want the microwave like Beyonce, and they're like, Danielle. And I'm like, and just, and Michael looks at me and says, I just stare at Black women because their skin's so beautiful. And I love just their hair. I'm always just been fascinated with it. But, and I think it's just so amazing to just, like, I love watching, different, I don't want to say festivals, like different holidays that are celebrated. I love just the pride, like just the family community that Black people have. Like, I know, like, like Melissa, you said, getting your circle, like in school, like, I just love all of that. It's just fascinating to me. And so I hope that my grandchildren kind of see that as a blessing and as something new to learn, and not as something they want to kind of put to the side, and, that it's different, because it's not. I mean, how cool is it? You have all these people and all these colors and all this stuff, and it's right here in front of you, and you can learn from that and grow from that. And so that's kind of my hope for my future generation. So what about you, Heather? What is something when you're gone and you're with Jesus, and what do you want, your great grandchildren or grandchildren to hear?
Yeah. So I just really hope that the world has changed. Like, this has been a pivotal point for us, and that things are different in the future. And I would hope that they still wouldn't be talking about, racism. I hope the world is like, I hope this is a pivotal moment for everybody, and that, we can move forward and changes are made. And so that the world would be different for, like, my grandchildren and great grandchildren.
Right. Melissa, what about you?
I've made the comments before, like, our parents, they all grew up during the civil rights movement.
Yeah.
This is our civil rights movement. And this is going to be something that's going to be down in the history books for our children and our grandchildren and great grandchildren to come. They're also going to be learning about, the older history, but they're also going to be learning about this history. What we are doing today and the changes that we are making today is going to be history. And it's going to matter, and it's going to make an impact. And I just want them to know that we didn't give up.
Right.
We fought for what was right. We were not going to back down. We were no longer going to be intimidated. We are not a minority as a race. We are a majority as children of Christ. Right. And that is what we are. And we are going to continue to fight until we are seen as God sees us. And I want them to know that the privileges that they are going to have at this time, I'm going to go ahead and speak that into existence, because it's coming. Yeah. I know that my child's going to grow up in a better world than I grew up in, and he's going to bring his children up into an amazing world, because we did not stop fighting for the justice. We did not stop fighting for what was right. And I cannot wait to see what's written in those history books. It's going to be amazing. Yeah. It's going to be good. It's going to be proper American history, not just American history based off of what is more comfortable topics.
Right.
It's going to be like, this is what changed America. Like, they're going to say in 2020, not only did we have coronavirus, but we also, had a light on another pandemic that had been going on for 400 years.
Yeah.
And this is where we said enough is enough as a society.
Yeah. Well, I just want to thank you, ladies, so much for coming on here and just being open and willing to just kind of share your heart. We're getting to the hour mark, so I'm sure people are watching are probably, okay, where are they going to go next? Because we're women, we could talk, we could talk all night. But just know how much I appreciate you guys just for opening up your hearts to us, and hopefully, even if one person listening kind of got a little something out of this and was like, maybe how I have been acting, is not good, or, kind of taken for granted their place, so just thank you guys so much. I'm going to be praying for both of y'all. Just one, because eventually we're all going to have teenagers, Lord help us. But, so, and, you never know, Harper and your son, they may grow up to be world changers. And with parents like you guys, I have no doubt that they will. So just thank you so much for joining us. Thank you guys for joining us and watching Forged Podcast. Feel free to leave comments, questions, anything that you want us to follow up on. So thank you, ladies, so much. I appreciate it.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.